Perfectionism and procrastination are ruining my life. I'm at my wit's end with my perfectionism. It's taken over my life and is causing me to procrastinate on every creative project I've ever wanted to pursue. The arts, music, animation, writing, video games, etc. I have so many ideas and passions, but I can never seem to follow through with them because I'm too afraid of not being able to execute them perfectly. I also have a hard time learning new things quickly and effectively. I put so much pressure on myself to understand everything immediately. This has made it difficult for me to progress in my personal and professional life. I constantly feel like I'm not good enough. It's not just affecting my hobbies, it's affecting my work and personal relationships too. I'm constantly self-guessing myself and feeling like a failure because I'm not meeting my own impossibly high standards. I'm struggling to find joy in anything anymore, and it's all because of my crippling perfectionism. Every task feels like a defeat, and if anything isn't perfect, it's like I'm failing at everything. I put every task on the back burner, procrastinating on everything I need to do, because I'm too afraid of not being able to execute it perfectly. I feel like I'm stuck in a cycle of perfectionism and procrastination. I don't know how to break free. I don't know where to begin, and what's worse, I don't know what to do if it doesn't work out. Have any of you experienced this level of perfectionism before? How did you overcome it? Are there any strategies or techniques that have worked for you? I'm willing to try anything at this point. The first thing that I'm going to say is someone says, I'm willing to try anything. And this is why I'm going to start by pushing back a little bit. Are you willing to try anything? Or are you only willing to try things that work? So if we look at this, what's the first thing to understand? The first thing to understand is that when someone says, I'm willing to try anything, we're not actually willing to try anything. That's crazy. I only want to try things that work. But let's understand perfectionism and procrastination, okay? So this person is brilliant, insightful, articulate. Love it. So let's understand a couple of things. The first is that the procrastination is a symptom of the root of perfectionism, right? So why is it hard for them to get started? They even laid this out. So if I want to be perfect, I can't get started until I know it'll be perfect. And so we can't get started because we're setting an impossible standard for ourselves because we need to be perfect. I need a plan that will achieve perfection. And I'm going to figure out the perfect plan before I get started because what's the point in starting without a perfect plan? Because then I'll do all this work and it won't be perfect and that won't be good enough. So why even bother getting started in the first place? So the procrastination comes out of the desire for perfection. So if you want to disable the procrastination, you need to do one of two things. Either let go of the perfectionism entirely and be okay starting without being perfect, which there's a path to. We've done a video about, we've done multiple videos about how to overcome procrastination. There's something in the ADHD guide, a guide doing stuff, by the way. But let's understand that procrastination, if your goal is perfection, you can't get started until you have a plan that is perfect. So since there's no such thing as a perfect plan, because as a human being, you can't predict the future, it's impossible to get started. So why do we say that this procrastinates? Does this person never do anything? No, they do stuff, but it's really hard for them to get started. And that's because something else has to overcome their need for procrastination. Desperation, last minute panic. It's due tomorrow. Someone else is mad at me. And so experiencing life as this person is awful. It's like you're a ping pong ball and you're getting swatted back and forth between perfectionism and what other negative emotion is required to overcome the procrastination related to the perfectionism. So you have no control over your life. You're being like swatted around by negative emotions. And when you're getting swatted around by negative emotions and you have no control, your performance suffers. You certainly ain't behaving perfect, let alone good. So how do we tackle this? So let's understand the desire for perfectionism. So we want to be perfect for a couple of reasons. The first is sometimes our performance correlates with our value as a human being. So if you look at like a lot of people grow up in situations where they're taught, you're not a good child. You're not a bad child. Oddly enough, people who are taught that they're good children or bad children, this doesn't apply to them. There are some of us who are taught that whether we are good children or bad children depends. So in a very traumatic situation, abusive situation, these people are not perfectionists. They don't struggle with perfectionism because they're like, I suck to begin with. I'm going to suck no matter what. Their problem is different. And then there are people who are sort of brought up in a secure environment where like, you're a good kid and it's okay to fail and like, that's not us. Then there are those of us who are perfectionistic. And what happens with the perfectionistic people, whether I'm a good or a bad person, depends on my performance. It depends. And once we fall into that, then we're in big trouble because our value as a human being and we want to make people happy. We want to make people happy. We want to be a good person. These are important ideals. These are good things to want. It's important to make other people happy. It's important to feel good about ourselves. Like self-esteem is important. The problem is that depending on your wiring, you started equating performance with value as a human being. And so what do we want? I want high self-esteem. I want to be a great human being. Of course, who doesn't want to be a great human being? How do I become a great human being? Great human being equals perfect performance. When do you see this? You see this in people whose value was dependent on their accomplishments. That's one reason why people are perfectionistic. Second reason why people are perfectionistic is they cannot tolerate the consequences of a non-perfect solution. So if I'm not perfect, that means that stuff can happen, okay? And that stuff, when that stuff happens that is not perfect, there is a response within me that is too painful to deal with. So I'll give you all an example. I like someone. I want to ask them out on a date. Them saying no hurts so much. I'm rejected. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be a POS. I want to be a Chad. And that rejection, I've learned to fear that rejection because I've been rejected or whatever in the past. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with a perfect strategy, because if I can come up with the perfect strategy, I can control the result. And if I can control the result, then I don't need to suffer. So the desire for perfection is a protection against the consequences of a suboptimal result. If I get a B and someone else gets an A, they're going to get an award. Everyone's going to cheer and clap, and I'm going to feel jealous. I hate feeling jealous. I hate feeling second best. I don't want to feel second best. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be perfect, and then I'm going to be number one, and then everyone's going to clap for me. And I'm going to feel so good. I hate that feeling of envy. I hate that feeling of jealousy, especially because I know that person deserved it and I don't deserve it, which makes it hurt even worse. So we desire perfection to protect ourselves from the consequences of a lack of perfection. So it usually has to do with intolerance of negative emotion, and has to do with our sense of ego or value. So then how do we tackle these two things? So let's start with the second one. So if we think about procrastination, I can't get started until I know I'm going to be perfect. And if I'm perfect, then everyone's going to cheer for me. Everyone's going to clap for me. I'm going to feel good, and I don't want to feel bad. And so if we think about literally what this will feel like for you is when you think about getting started, there will be an anticipation of a particular feeling. So what the procrastination will look like is if I get started now, and you can pay attention to yourself, okay? What this looks like is if I get started now, your mind will warn you of a particular consequence. You'll start to feel fear or jealousy or inferiority or something like that. And that's how you know that that's what's going on. Even the thought of getting started evokes that emotion. And then that emotion is something you're so terrified from, you run away from it, so you don't get started. You procrastinate. The other thing is that if you're trying to get started and you think about other people, and this can be tricky because this can evoke an emotion as well, but this person will think this about me. And this person will think this about me. And if I do it this way, they will think this about me. If I do this, they will love me. And if what you're chasing is something from someone else, that's that other kind of perfectionism, because it's about ego. It's about wanting to be seen a particular way. Now the question becomes, okay, so what do we do about it? And that's where each of these things is like monumental tasks on its own. So now I'm left with the task of trying to figure out how to help you all with it. So let's start with the emotions. So the first thing is when you feel that procrastination coming on, you will respond to it. You'll either quit the task and beat yourself up, or you'll complete the task and kind of beat yourself up and push through it. Does that kind of make sense? I think about, okay, I need to start studying today. And then I step away and then I start thinking about, I didn't study today. I need to study, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to beat myself up. But the interesting thing is once you start that cycle, you're no longer thinking about studying. You're beating yourself up for not studying. So you've actually stepped away from the task. Or when that beating yourself up is strong enough, you push yourself through and you start engaging in the task. But you're not sitting in that middle zone, if that makes sense. You've pushed through the procrastination or you've run away from the procrastination. And now the problem has become you haven't really conquered the procrastination. You've let your guilt, despair, or frustration overcome it, which means now you are becoming dependent on the frustration, fear, or guilt to overcome the procrastination. Then you're screwed, because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So what we need to do is just sit with procrastination. Just sit there in that moment. It's not about beating yourself up. Today I need to do some studying. I'm going to try to study right now. Don't force yourself into it. Notice the frustration. Just sit there and don't do your work. Sit with the procrastination. Don't start it. Don't run away from it. Don't beat yourself up. You'll notice those things and move away from when you start beating yourself up. No, I should just start it. No. We're just going to sit there. Set a timer for 5 minutes. We are not going to start studying for 5 minutes. Just going to sit and do nothing. So how do we stop playing ping pong? Stop hitting the ball. You're tired of getting knocked around? Just sit. And this is where your mind will start to rebel. It'll say, but if I just sit, I'll never get anything done. And all those kinds of things. And there it is again with the stick. What is the ping pong paddle? Pop. Nope. So just 5 minutes, we're gonna do anything. No, you need to do stuff. You need to do stuff. We're just gonna chill. 5 minutes. Breathe. You can do meditation if you want to. You got to be careful because if you start meditating to start working, that's another ping pong paddle. You need to meditate more. If you meditated better, you'd be able to work. Nope, we're just going to sit 5 minutes, set a timer. Just feel the tolerance. And this is where you say, but it's not working. I'm not being productive. Yes, you are. What you are doing for those 5 minutes is tolerating the emotion and not letting it control you. You are literally training yourself to be resistant to the swat of the ping pong paddle. Your ball is becoming heavier. It's no longer a ping pong ball. It's becoming stone, lead, some kind of super dense alloy. And if you rise to the level of Buddha, you're going to be like a supernova or a black hole, infinite density, and nothing will be able to touch you. Just tolerate. Don't do a damn thing and don't react to any of your emotions either way. Do y'all get that? Now, what if you have the other one? What if people think this and think that about you? This is where it's kind of tricky, but what you've got to do is recognize there's two different things here. One is the task that you need to do, and one is how people will respond to the task. Which one do you really want? Because as long as the two are tangled together, you're SOL. Y'all get that? Like you're like trying to fight a war on two fronts. You can't make people happy and do work. You can either do work, you can't even really ever make people happy. All you can do is do the work. So acknowledge that in this work, you are adding another victory condition. It's like we're playing this game and now there's this second victory condition. And it's like, holy crap, that makes winning the game way harder. And what are we actually trying to do? We're trying to stop procrastinating. So what we're trying to do is get started. But when we layer in that second victory condition of this needs to be perfect so that people will love me, like that's really hard because you can't get people to love you. And now it's like I'm playing an RTS game, or let's say I'm playing an FPS game, and the victory condition is like something that doesn't exist in the game. It's like there's one victory condition, which is score like 15 points by hitting 15 bullseyes. And the second victory condition is get elected as president of the United States. You're like, that's not even in the game. That's what we're doing. Like if you're trying to like study and your mind is adding this thing of if you don't get an A, your parents won't love you. Like how are you even supposed to study? Like there's nothing in the textbook about making your parents love you. That's something you're layering on top. So separate those two things. It's the only shot you've got is to separate those two things. And even then it'll be a challenge. It's not easy to separate them, but then sort of ask yourself in that moment, can I at least get started on the work? And I'll worry about making other people, I know I want to make them happy. I can worry about that later. So as best as you can, procrastinate on making other people happy and just get started with the work. Can I just do this for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? And if it's not good, I'll solve that problem. Talk to the part of your mind that's like, oh, it's not going to be enough. And it's like, okay, fine, but it'll be a start. We always quit later, but let's get started. And this kind of cognitive reframe, this cognitive flexibility can be really hard to do, and it's not going to work the first time you do it. But if you keep trying, you'll start to get some traction, right? It's kind of like learning how to do a push-up. If you've never done a push-up before, you can't even do a single push-up. So even if you're like thinking about pull-ups, like if you can't do a single pull-up and failure is inevitable, how do you learn how to do one pull-up? You jump up, you grab the bar, and then you train yourself on the descent, right? You let the rate of dropping slow down, and that'll strengthen the muscles, and then eventually you'll be able to do one pull-up. So oddly enough, trying to separate it, even if it doesn't work, is still strengthening those muscles. And the real way to overcome this, whether you're becoming, a ping pong ball to a black hole or separating these things out, it's a painful process of repeated failures. And the beautiful thing is once you start engaging with that, something will shift in your mind. It's okay to fail. And now the pendulum is swung far, far, far away from perfectionism. And then shit becomes easy.